Ooh. Thank you, Philip, for that. Thanks. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here with everybody today. So I'm a marine mammal scientist, and I've known and been entangled with Roger since the mid-90s. Entangled in the sense that we've both been colleagues and really close friends, and we've worked together on a number of different projects in terms of protecting whales and dolphins, on conservation and welfare projects. My own research focuses on trying to decode dolphin communication, particularly bottlenose dolphin communication, and trying to understand or get at least glimpses of their cognitive abilities. And I've used both low and some high-tech approaches. Low-tech approaches in the sense of using a simple mirror to see reflections of their mind. And like us, they use mirrors to view themselves. They understand they're tools, and they can look at themselves. We used to think that was uniquely human, but other animals like apes and magpies share that ability with us, and elephants. We did that study as well. I've been very fortunate to have these close encounters with these minds. We've used some higher tech approaches, relatively simple underwater keyboards interfaced with computers, and now we've designed, with my colleague at Rockefeller, Marcelo Magnasco, a large touchscreen, a 4x8 touchscreen, to try to give voice to these animals, to give them some agency in showing if we give them choice and control, what will they show us? I'm very excited about that work. And this is, in fact, Roger and I, in the last year, spent a lot of time together, and we discussed this possibility of extending some sort of interactive system to whales and others to, again, show that they have agency. Anyway, unlike Roger's vast experience with humpbacks, my experience with them has been only limited to one case, and that was actually when we had a very large whale that we called Humphrey wander into San Francisco Bay and work his way up in through little river estuaries, and we could not get him out. We had Ken Norris helping us, and a variety of people. I was on the rescue group, and I had the honor to do a playback where we actually played back sounds of humpbacks that Scott Baker sent us that had been recorded of animals up in Alaska. And we were fascinated to see, as soon as we turned the speaker on, this whale came to us. It was a really successful playback, and he followed us out through the Golden Gate Bridge. And I spent a wonderful time talking to Roger. The first time I met Roger was after we did this rescue in 1985. And I had met Roger in the mid-90s. And he wanted to hear about what happened. And when I told him, he said, I wonder if that I'm sorry, I forgot a key thing I wanted to mention. When we got this whale outside of the Golden Gate Bridge, we had a big flotilla of boats. And Humphrey moved through the flotilla. He had gone the wrong direction when he got out of the bridge and approached our boat only. We were in the middle of a bullseye of boats, and there he was at our boat. All the engines were off. Our boat looked like all the other boats around us, yet he found our boat. He pressed his ventral side, his belly against our boat, looked up at us for a good 15 seconds. We were all crying. The whale had a wet eye. We had wet eyes. And when I told this to Roger, he said, I wonder if he understood what you guys had tried to do, that you tried to help him. Do they have empathy? And again, Roger was a pioneer in thinking, and now we have growing evidence that humpbacks may indeed show empathy to other whales. So again, a pioneer in so many ways. So today I want to tell you what I was thinking when I had to come up and say, what am I going to say about Roger? It's a really emotional day for me, as it is for you. And the first thing I wanted to say is that Roger changed the world indeed. And he's changed our perspectives, the perspectives of so many of us, that we also can feel we can change the world. We can change the world by learning about the communication, the cognition, the social lives of cetaceans. And all of us, so many of us here represent people who have been doing this kind of work. So it's a great gathering, and I think he'd be thrilled to be here with us today. But not only learning about this, but our ability to communicate and share what we've learned about these magnificent animals through powerful narratives and public science communication. We are honored to be able to work with these animals, and I feel that's our responsibility, as did Roger, to to share this information, giving agency and voice to those whose voices we strive to understand, but who can't speak in ways that we do understand yet. And again, I'm looking at the CETI group here because you guys are really amazing what you're doing. So male humpbacks, that male humpbacks sing in itself was a landmark discovery by Roger and his collaborators, Katie Payne, here with us today, Scott McVeigh, and Frank Watlington. But beyond the discovery itself and its publication in Science in 1971, Roger also had that clear vision and insight and recognized the power of juxtaposing the plaintive and ethereal songs of humpbacks with images of whaling to make the world care, to make the world understand the plights that whales face in the world. It was an actually brilliant example of translational science at its best. The album, as we know, became an acoustic icon and a global anthem for the environmental movement and gave birth to the Save the Whales campaign. It raised global consciousness and awareness of the dangers of whales and that the dangers that other whales and cetaceans face, and it led to the 1972 U.S. Mammal Protection Act, landmark legislation that really marked the end of large-scale whaling in the United States and saved several whale populations from extinction. Continued efforts that led to a global ban on whaling passed by the International Whaling Commission in 1982 and signed except for Japan and Norway. So humpback whale songs, as we know now, are on board the Voyager spacecraft as part of a signature of our planet. As we all know, Roger's quest was to make people fall in love with whales, and he did. And hopefully he will continue to through his work. During his career, Roger was a trustee, a director, a member of many and a member and CEO of many scientific and conservation organizations. One of the NGOs was the U.S.-based Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. I want to mention this today for a particular reason. In 2001, working in close partnership with Sea Shepherd's CEO Pritam Singh, they envisioned and transformed a change in Sea Shepherd from more of a pirate organization into a new science-based and action-based tour de force that and their first focus would be on saving the vaquita. In fact, the most endangered cetacean species on this planet. Their strategy was to convince the Mexican government to partner with them. I mean, can you imagine partnering with a government agency, Sea Shepherd? And the only way to save vaquita was to work with the Mexican Navy, and they're doing it. They convinced them to do this. And what's amazing now is that there was just an IUCN report published in May that in the first time in 30 years, the vaquita population seems to be somewhat stabilized, which is remarkable. And it's and again, what Roger and his ideas have shown is that we can save a species. This is a great strategy, partnering with governments. So again, another pioneering effort by Roger, an inspiring effort of Roger's vision, commitment, and action-based efforts. Okay. The second thing I thought was not to say anything else, but rather give the rest of my time to Roger so he can talk to you directly. So it's a pleasure now for me to show you, I think this is a premiere of a film that was made about Roger by an award-winning filmmaker, Ran Levi Yamamura, who's a friend of mine. I introduced him to Roger. He spent a weekend with Roger about a year ago up in his home in Vermont, maybe over a year ago. And this is perhaps the last filmed interview of Roger. So if we could have that film now, thanks.
I was after studying something which made it possible for the world to fall in love with whales. And the reason I felt that way is because whales were being killed. About 33,000 baleen whales, the big ones, were being killed every year when I got started back in 1967. And I felt somebody has got to somehow wake up the world and get the world to fall in love with humpback whales and whales in general. and everything else fell from there. It was known that whales made sound. That was pretty much it when I started. And I asked one of the trustees of then New York Zoological Society, now the Wildlife Conservation Society, where he saw whales because he had spent a lot of time at sea. And he said, oh, I see them off Bermuda, and I see them in the spring. So I went to Bermuda in spring. And when I was there, I met a man who he also had said, oh, I have a friend there who listens to whales, who works for the U.S. Navy. His name is Frank Watlington. And I went to Bermuda and I met Frank, and he said, well, he had some recordings that he thought were probably whales, but he wasn't sure. And the reason he thought they were whales is because they were very loud and they were very much lower frequency than most of the animals in the ocean. And so he thought, well, maybe it's whales. And he also heard those sounds only when there were whales in the general area of the ocean. And so he was going out that day, and my former wife, Katie, and I went on board his boat to just see what he did when he was towing hydrophones. And as we got on the boat, he took us down into the engine room, and when we got into the engine room, there was a generator, a big one, going, and it was just roaring, and you had to shout to be heard over it. And he took a magnetic tape out of his pocket, and he walked over to the corner where there was a tape recorder, and he threaded the tape through the wheels of the recorder. And then he hit the play button, and he had some headphones on, and he listened and adjusted dials and gains. And then he took off the headphones and handed them to me. And as he did so, he said, I think these are humpback whales, shouting while he did it, to be heard over the generator. And I put on the headphones and started listening and was totally transformed. It was a different world, a different universe. It was just utterly beautiful and absolutely shocking, in spite of the fact that it would be quite impossible to imagine a much worse place to be listening to such sort of, romantic kinds of sounds. The sounds that these whales make are made by males only. It took us years to figure that out. We confirmed the fact that Frank Watlington's guess that these were made by humpback whales was correct. He was absolutely right. And he lent me one of his tapes, and I listened to it again and again and again until I had memorized the song. I wasn't even trying to, but I heard it so many times I realized I had memorized it. And then I realized that it's repeating itself. And it was repeating itself rhythmically. And when some animal repeats itself rhythmically in the sounds it's making, you say that it's singing, whether the animal is a cricket or a frog or a bird or a person or a whale. And so these animals were, in fact, singing, and these were songs. And when we realized that, it was totally exciting and shocking and amazing. And from there, everything went forward. And I have been working on these sounds on and off for about the past, I guess, 50 years. And others have been, loads of people now work on whale songs. And lots of work is going on. And still, we do not know for sure what the sounds actually mean. They clearly are some form of communication, I believe, and also they are clearly learned from each other, because one of the discoveries that Katie, my former wife, made was that these sounds are in fact changing all the time. To sing, if you are a humpback whale, is to change. That's not true for some of the other whales that sing. Blue whales hardly change their songs at all. And, for example, but they have songs much lower in frequency and louder. They make the loudest songs or loudest sounds that are made by any animals on Earth. And these sounds are adapted to travel long distances. In the case of humpback whales, a few of the frequencies, the very lowest frequencies, are adapted to go for long distances. And I figured out that the sounds that are made, for example, by blue whales and fin whales, these are the largest whales and the lowest in frequency, that their sounds can travel nowadays not very far, but years ago, before the ocean was totally polluted with background noise from ships, which it now is, they would be able to hear a sound as far away as completely across an ocean. And when you looked at how far could they hear a sound if it was traveling in deep ocean, and the distance that they could hear each other was, we found out, 13,000 miles. That turns out to be the longest deep water path anywhere in the world. I believe that science has incredibly important things to say, but we scientists don't do a very good job of saying it. And it's up to artists of the world to do it well, because artists can express emotions, and emotions are what get people to act. And acting is what is totally needed now. In respect to whales, I think it's the future. It is the hope. It's how we get there. It's how we get to a point where we fall in love with whales, fall in love with nature, fall in love with the wild world.
Okay, thank you. I think we should. So I think it's, thanks. I really wanted to share that film. It's perhaps, again, the most recent film we have of Roger, and it's really a message from Roger to us and future generations. I told him I was going to be happy to get this film out. Roger and I had an inexplicable connection, as I said, a deep commitment to getting the rest of the world to perceive cetaceans as individuals with agency and get them to realize that they live in complex societies in the seas that need to be respected and protected. All of us are here today in different ways. I think we're incredibly lucky to have been entangled with Roger. And again, today we celebrate Roger and his life well lived. Thank you.